Sir, you are not permitted to enter this area. This property is under HOA management. If you don't leave, we will call the police. I just drove 6 hours from Washington, D.C. to Nebraska to inherit my grandfather's farm after he passed away, only to find 2 security guards in black uniforms blocking the gate. Behind them, a blonde woman with highlights stepped out of a silver Lexus holding a thick folder. Your grandfather owed the HOA $47,000. This farm is under our management until the debt is settled. 3 generations of family land. The place where I learned to drive a tractor at the age of 8. And a woman I've never met is telling me I can't set foot on it. She doesn't know who I am. She's about to find out. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it.
The woman extends her hand like we're meeting at a cocktail party. Brenda Holloway, president of Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. And you must be the grandson from the city. She says city the way some people say disease. I don't shake her hand. I'm too busy looking at the 2 guards flanking the gate. The chain wrapped around the metal bars, the padlock that definitely wasn't there 3 months ago when my grandfather was still alive. The Nebraska wind cuts through my jacket. December air, sharp and unforgiving. Behind the gate, I can see the farmhouse in the distance, white paint peeling, porch sagging slightly on the left side, but still standing, still mine. At least, it's supposed to be mine. Brenda opens her folder and pulls out a stack of documents. Your grandfather accumulated significant debts to the HOA over the past 2 years. Unpaid assessments, maintenance violations, legal fees for enforcement actions. The total comes to $47,322.17. She recites the number like she's been practicing. Probably has. Until this balance is settled, the property remains under HOA protective management for the community's benefit, of course. I ask to see the documentation. She hesitates for just a moment, then hands me a few pages. Assessment notices dated back 18 months. Violation reports for unmaintained structures and agricultural equipment in disrepair. And at the bottom of the stack, a document labeled Property Management Agreement with my grandfather's signature at the bottom. I stare at that signature. I've seen my grandfather's handwriting my entire life. Birthday cards, letters when I was overseas, the deed he showed me when I was 12, promising the farm would be mine someday. His handwriting was shaky, uneven. He had Parkinson's disease for the last 8 years of his life. The signature on this document is smooth, confident, perfect curves, steady lines. Either my grandfather made a miraculous recovery in his final months, or someone forged his name on a legal document. I don't say this out loud. I just look at Brenda and ask when this agreement was signed. About 14 months ago, she says, your grandfather recognized he could no longer maintain the property and voluntarily entered into this arrangement. Voluntarily, 14 months ago, my grandfather could barely hold a coffee cup without spilling. You might be wondering why I didn't flash my FBI credentials right there. Pull rank, demand they open the gate. Here's what 12 years of investigating financial crimes has taught me. The badge is a tool, not a solution. If I reveal who I am now, Brenda calls her lawyer, documents get shredded, stories get aligned. Witnesses suddenly forget everything. Right now, she thinks I'm just another grieving relative from out of town. Inconvenient, but manageable. She thinks I'll argue for a few days, realize I can't afford a lawyer, and eventually sign whatever papers she puts in front of me. That assumption is her weakness, and I'm going to let her keep it as long as possible. I tell Brenda I need time to review the documents. She smiles, all teeth and no warmth. Of course, take a few days, but understand, Mr. Bailey, the property remains secured until this matter is resolved. For everyone's protection, she hands me a business card, Victor Shaw, attorney at law. Our legal representative will be in touch to discuss your options. She turns and walks back to her Lexus, heels clicking on the frozen dirt. The guards don't move. The gate stays locked. I get back in my car and drive to the nearest motel, 15 miles down the road. Here's something you need to understand about HOAs. They have power, real power. They can levy fines, place liens, and even initiate foreclosure in extreme cases. But that power has limits. An HOA cannot hire private security to physically block an owner from their property. They cannot manage a property without a court order or a legitimate, legally recorded agreement. And they absolutely cannot forge signatures on legal documents. What Brenda Holloway is doing isn't HOA enforcement. It's something else entirely, something that looks an awful lot like organized theft, hiding behind bureaucratic language. That night, I sit in my motel room with my laptop open and my phone charging. I call my colleague Helen Chavez back at the bureau. I need you to run some names for me, I tell her, and pull any property records you can find for a farm in Madison County, Nebraska. She asks if this is official. I tell her I'm not sure yet, but I will be soon. I photograph every document Brenda gave me. I zoom in on that signature again. Smooth, steady, wrong. My grandfather's last letter to me arrived 2 months before he died. They're trying to take the farm. Alexander, I don't know what to do, but you will. You're the FBI. You'll know. He trusted me to protect what he built. I arrived too late to save him, but I won't be too late to save his legacy. I open a new folder on my laptop and label it Meadowbrook. Then I start typing everything I observed today. Names, dates, details, inconsistencies. The investigation has begun. Brenda Holloway just doesn't know it yet. Monday morning, the Madison County Recorder's Office opens at 8:30. I'm waiting in the parking lot at 8:15, coffee in hand, laptop bag over my shoulder. The building is small, brick, the kind of government office that hasn't been renovated since the 1980s. Inside, a woman behind the counter looks up from her computer with the tired patience of someone who's answered the same questions for 30 years. I tell her I need to search property records for my grandfather's farm. She asks for the parcel number. I give it to her. She types, clicks, waits. Then she turns the monitor so I can see. What specifically are you looking for? Everything. I tell her, liens, transfers, recorded agreements, anything filed in the last 3 years. The first thing I check is whether the HOA filed a lien for the $47,000 Brenda claims my grandfather owed. In most states, if you owe money to an HOA and don't pay, they file a lien against your property. It's public record. It's how they protect their claim. I scroll through the results. No lien. Not from Meadowbrook Estates HOA, not from anyone. The property is clean. I ask the clerk to search for any recorded property management agreement involving the farm. She types again. Nothing. No agreement on file. The document Brenda showed me, the one with my grandfather's forged signature, was never recorded with the county. That's not an oversight. That's intentional. A recorded document can be challenged. An unrecorded document exists only in Brenda's folder, where she controls who sees it and when. Here's where it gets interesting. I asked to see the tax payment history. Property taxes are due in 2 installments each year. My grandfather paid on time, every year, for decades. I expected to see his name on the recent payments. Instead, I see something else. For the past 18 months, property taxes on the farm have been paid by an entity called Heartland Asset Management, LLC. Not my grandfather, not the estate, a company I've never heard of. Paying taxes on land that belongs to my family. No lien, no recorded agreement, but someone is paying the bills. If this were a legitimate debt collection, Brenda would have filed paperwork to protect her claim. She didn't, because this isn't about collecting a debt. It's about positioning for a takeover. That afternoon, I drove to the farm again, not to confront anyone, just to observe. I park on the county road, 100 yards from the gate, and watch through binoculars. The guards are gone. The Lexus is gone. But there's activity near the barn. A truck I don't recognize. 2 men are loading equipment, my grandfather's equipment. The tractor he bought in 1992, the hay baler he rebuilt with his own hands, they're taking it in broad daylight. My first instinct is to call the local sheriff, but I stop myself. If I report a theft now, Brenda will know someone is watching. She'll lock down, destroy documents, and align stories with her people. Worse, I have no proof these men aren't authorized. The management agreement gives her cover. Even if it's forged, I need more. So, I do what I'm trained to do. I photograph the truck, the license plate, the men's faces, and I let them drive away. Surveillance over confrontation, evidence over emotion. I think about my grandfather in his final months. The estate file I picked up from his attorney contained medical records, Parkinson's disease for 8 years, then a secondary diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's 18 months ago. At the same time, Heartland Asset Management started paying its taxes. Someone knew he was deteriorating. Someone was watching, waiting. I think about his last letter, the one I didn't answer for 2 weeks because I was buried in a fraud case in Virginia. They're trying to take the farm. Alexander. He knew. He tried to tell me. The guilt is there, sharp and familiar. But guilt doesn't solve cases. Evidence does. I push it down and focus on what I can control. Back at the motel, Helen calls with the preliminary results. Heartland Asset Management LLC was registered 3 years ago in Nebraska. The business address is a P.O. box in Omaha. The registered agent is an individual named Victor Shaw, the same Victor Shaw whose business card Brenda handed me, the attorney representing the HOA. I ask Helen to dig deeper. Who are the officers? Where does the money flow? Are there other properties connected to this company? She says she'll have more by tomorrow. I thank her and hang up. Then I open my laptop and start building a timeline. 3 years ago, Heartland Asset Management was created. 18 months ago, my grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and the LLC started paying taxes on his farm. 14 months ago, he allegedly signed a management agreement that he can barely read. 3 months ago, he died, and now, a woman I've never met is telling me I owe $47,000 to access my own inheritance. The sequence isn't a coincidence, it's choreography. Someone identified my grandfather as a target. Someone monitored his decline. Someone built a paper trail designed to look legitimate just long enough to complete a transfer before anyone could stop it. This isn't a billing dispute. This isn't HOA overreach. This is a system designed to strip vulnerable people of their property. My grandfather wasn't the first victim. I'm certain of that now. And if I don't stop them, he won't be the last. I save the timeline and close my laptop. Tomorrow. I start finding the others, because every system has a pattern, and every pattern has a flaw. Tuesday. Everything accelerates. I wake up at 6:30 to an envelope slid under my motel room door. No stamp, no postmark, hand-delivered sometime during the night. Inside is a single sheet of paper on legal letterhead. Victor Shaw, attorney at law. The letter informs me that I am unlawfully interfering with property under the management of Heartland Asset Management LLC, and demands that I cease all contact with Meadowbrook Estates residents and representatives within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action, including but not limited to restraining orders and civil damages. 72 hours, not 30 days, not even a week. 3 days, by noon, things get worse. A knock at my door. Sheriff Raymond Alvarez, Madison County, late 50s, weathered face, hand resting casually on his belt. Mr. Gitbohm, Mr. Bailey, I received a complaint this morning. Brenda Holloway says you've been harassing HOA staff and trespassing on managed property. I tell him I haven't set foot past that gate. He nods slowly. I'm not here to investigate. This is just a courtesy visit. Brenda's well known around here, and she asked me to have a word. No formal charges filed, but if there are further incidents, I'll have to get involved officially. He hands me a copy of the complaint anyway. Brenda's signature at the bottom, filed this morning at 9:15, a legal threat at dawn, a sheriff's visit by lunch, that afternoon. I return to my motel room to find the door propped open. Inside, a housekeeper is stripping the bed. I ask what's happening. She looks uncomfortable. Sir, your reservation was canceled. The front desk said you need to check out by 5. I go to the front desk. The manager avoids my eyes. I'm sorry. Mr. Bailey, we received a call from our corporate office this morning. They said there is a potential liability issue with your stay, something about ongoing litigation involving the guest. They instructed us to refund your payment and release the room immediately. I ask who called corporate. He shrugs. I just follow instructions, sir. Someone contacted the motel's parent company. Someone used the threat of litigation to force management's hand. Someone wants me gone. I sit in my car in the parking lot, engine running, heat blasting against the December cold. 3 attacks in one day. legal threat, police pressure, housing cut off. This isn't improvisation. This is a playbook, refined through practice, designed to overwhelm. Legal notice creates fear of consequences. A sheriff's visit creates fear of authority. Losing housing creates desperation and exhaustion. Stack them together, and most people break. Most people decide the fight isn't worth it. Most people aren't FBI agents who've watched criminals use exactly these tactics on victims who had no one to help them. I'm not most people. I drive to the edge of town, to a farmhouse I spotted on the county map. Martha Jennings, according to property records, she's lived next to my grandfather's land for over 40 years. She answers the door with suspicion in her eyes. But when I mention my grandfather's name, her face softens. Henry's grandson, I wondered when you'd come. She invites me inside. The kitchen smells like coffee and old wood. She pours me a cup without asking and sits across from me at the table. They got to your grandfather the same way they got to the others, she says. Same pattern, same people, same lies. Martha tells me about 3 other farms in the area that changed hands over the past 5 years. Elderly owners, families far away, HOA violations that appeared out of nowhere, legal notices from Victor Shaw, and then, quietly, the property would transfer to Heartland Asset Management or one of its affiliated companies. My son lives in Omaha, she says. When they started sending me notices, he drove down and raised hell. They backed off. But not everyone has someone to fight for them. I ask about the security guards, the ones blocking my grandfather's gate. She nods grimly. Derek Nash owns a company called Heartland Security. He's Brenda's muscle. Those guards at your gate, they work for him. He handles anyone who doesn't scare easily. The same Derek Nash whose men stood at my grandfather's gate. Another piece of the puzzle is clicking into place. I ask if she kept any of the notices they sent her. She disappears into a back room and returns with a shoebox full of papers. Letters from Victor Shaw, assessment notices from the HOA, a copy of a management agreement she never signed, but somehow has her name on it. I photograph everything. Same format as my grandfather's documents. Same language, same forged signature style. This isn't one bad actor making mistakes. This is an operation running on templates. I thank Martha and drive toward the county line, where I find a motel in the next town over, 30 miles from Meadowbrook, far enough that Brenda's reach might not extend here. As I check in under a different name, I map out what I've learned. Brenda Holloway identifies targets and gives orders. Victor Shaw creates legal cover with fake documents and threatening letters. Derek Nash provides intimidation through his security company. Heartland Asset Management collects the properties at the end. 4 players, 1 system, at least 4 victims that I know of. Probably more. I have a choice to make. Flash my badge tomorrow, call the Omaha field office. Shut this down fast. Brenda gets arrested, maybe the others, too. But with the evidence I have now, a good lawyer could argue this is a civil dispute, misunderstanding, paperwork errors. She might walk with a fine and do this again somewhere else. Or I can stay in the shadows, keep gathering evidence, build a case so complete that when I finally move, every single one of them goes down. The safe choice is to end it now. The right choice is to finish it properly. I sit on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the ceiling. My grandfather trusted me to protect what he built. I won't settle for half measures.
Let me pause here for a second. I want to ask you something. Alexander is standing at a crossroads. Option A, flash the badge now, end it fast, but risk Brenda walking free and starting over somewhere else. Option B, stay undercover, take more risk, but bring down the entire network. I'm Michael Vincent, your storyteller today on Fallout HOA. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments below. Let's see whose strategy comes out on top. Because Alexander's next decision changes everything. Wednesday morning. I walk into the only diner in town, a place called May's Kitchen that my grandfather mentioned in his letters. The bell above the door chimes. A few heads glance up from the counter. Conversations dip slightly, then resume at a lower volume. A woman in an apron looks at me, then busies herself wiping down an already clean surface. I take a seat at an empty booth near the window. 5 minutes pass. No one comes to take my order. A waitress walks by twice, refilling coffee for the tables around me without making eye contact.
On the third pass, I catch her attention directly. She hesitates, then walks over with visible reluctance. "What can I get you?" Her voice is flat, professional, distant. I ordered coffee and eggs. She writes it down without looking at me and disappears into the kitchen. The food takes 25 minutes. It arrives lukewarm. This is what isolation looks like in a small town. No confrontation, no accusations, just absence. I overhear fragments from the booth behind me, voices low but not low enough. "That's him, the grandson. Heard he's causing problems for the HOA. Brenda said he abandoned the old man, only showed up when there was money." The words land like small cuts. Brenda has been shaping the narrative while I've been gathering evidence. To this community, I'm not the victim. I'm the outsider who left his grandfather to die alone and now wants to profit from the inheritance. I think about my grandfather sitting in this same diner, month after month, while his mind faded. Did he try to tell anyone? Did they dismiss him as confused, or did Brenda reach them first? The anger rises in my chest, hot, tight. I want to stand up and tell everyone the truth, show them the forged signatures, the shell company, the pattern that's been bleeding this community dry for years. But anger reveals your hand before you're ready to play it. I finish my cold eggs, leave cash on the table, and walk out. Back at the motel, I sit on the bed with my phone in my hand. One call to my special agent in charge, and I could have bureau resources here by tomorrow. Brenda in handcuffs before the weekend. But federal prosecution requires federal jurisdiction. Right now, what I have looks like a local property dispute with contested documents, without clear evidence of wire fraud, bank fraud, or interstate criminal activity. The U.S. Attorney's Office would decline to prosecute and kick it back to state courts. I put the phone down. Not yet. Helen calls that afternoon. Her voice is careful, precise, the way it gets when she's found something significant. "Victor Shaw," she says. "No active law license in Nebraska. He was admitted to the bar in Kansas 12 years ago, suspended 8 years ago for misappropriating client funds, never reinstated." I pull up the legal letter he sent me and look at the letterhead again. Victor Shaw, attorney at law, an Omaha address, but no bar number, no state designation, no firm affiliation, details that a real attorney would include because they're required, details that someone impersonating an attorney would skip because they can't provide them. Every document Victor Shaw has signed is fraudulent. "That's not a civil matter, that's criminal impersonation," Helen continues. Derek Nash, owner of Heartland Security, LLC. Prior conviction for aggravated assault, 2015, served 18 months, released early. The conviction was expunged 2 years later as part of a plea agreement. Expungement is legally valid. It means Derek can truthfully say he has no criminal record on most background checks. But federal databases retain the original information, and what that information tells me is that the man providing muscle for Brenda's operation has a documented history of violence. The intimidation tactics aren't improvised. They're coming from someone who knows exactly how much pressure a person can take before they break. The next part is what I've been waiting for. Heartland Asset Management, Helen says. Registered in Nebraska 3 years ago, connected to 2 other LLCs in South Dakota, different names, same registered agent. All 3 have been involved in property transfers in rural counties across both states. At least 7 properties in the last 4 years. All previously owned by elderly individuals. All transferred after the owners died or were declared incapacitated. 7 properties, not 3, 7. This isn't a local scheme. This is a regional operation targeting vulnerable people across state lines. That's the federal hook I need. I ask about the other victims. One name stands out. Earl Thompson, 80 years old, lost his farm 2 years ago under circumstances nearly identical to my grandfather's. His son, Benjamin White, tried to fight it but ran out of money for legal fees. The case was dismissed. The farm was sold to a developer 6 months later. Benjamin still lives in the area. Helen texts me his address. I need to be clear about something. An FBI agent investigating a case involving his own family is a conflict of interest. If this goes wrong, if I cut corners or let emotion drive decisions, I could compromise everything. Disciplinary action, loss of credentials. a case that gets thrown out on procedural grounds. But I also know this 7 properties across 2 states, and no one has connected the pattern. Local law enforcement sees individual disputes. State agencies see paperwork irregularities. No one has the access or the training to see the whole picture. If this operation isn't documented correctly now, with proper chain of custody and federal evidentiary standards, no one will ever see the full pattern. And Brenda will keep doing this until there's nothing left to take, tomorrow. I drive to Benjamin White's house. He has documents. He has first-hand experience. And if I'm right, he has evidence that ties this operation together in ways Brenda never anticipated. I close my laptop and stare at the wall. The anger from this morning is still there, but it's different now. Quieter, colder, converted into something useful. I've spent 12 years learning how to dismantle criminal operations piece by piece. That's what I do. That's what I'm good at. Brenda Holloway is running a fraud scheme in a place where she thinks no one is watching. She's wrong. I'm watching. And I'm documenting everything. Thursday morning, Benjamin White lives in a small house on the outskirts of Lincoln, about 40 miles from Meadowbrook. The paint is faded. The lawn needs work, but there's a truck in the driveway and lights on inside. I knock. The man who answers is in his early 40s, with tired eyes. The kind of exhaustion that comes from years of fighting a battle no one else believes in. I tell him my name. I tell him my grandfather was Henry Bailey. I tell him I think the same people who took his father's farm are trying to take mine. He stares at me for a long moment. Then he steps aside and lets me in. The kitchen table is covered in papers. Benjamin has been waiting for this conversation for 2 years. I knew someone would come eventually, he says. I just didn't think it would take this long. He pours coffee without asking and sits across from me. My father was sharp until the end. 80 years old, still driving his own tractor, still managing his books. Then one day, he gets a letter from the HOA saying he owes $12,000 in back assessments. He'd never missed a payment in his life. Benjamin pulls out a folder and slides it across the table. 3 months later, they had him sign a management agreement. 6 months after that, he had a stroke. By the time I got power of attorney, the farm was already gone. I open the folder. The documents inside are almost identical to my grandfather's. Same format, same language, same notary stamp from Linda Price, same signature that looks too smooth, too confident for an 80-year-old man with arthritis. I ask Benjamin if his father had any cognitive issues before the stroke. He shakes his head. None. But their lawyer submitted medical records during the civil case claiming Dad had early dementia, records from a clinic in Omaha he never visited. My attorney tried to subpoena the original files, but the clinic said they had been transferred to off-site storage and couldn't be located. Convenient timing. Fabricated medical records, introduced as evidence to discredit a dead man's competency. Another layer of the fraud. I lay out my own documents next to his. Assessment notices from Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, management agreement with a forged signature, property tax payments from Heartland Asset Management, LLC. Benjamin looks at them, and his face tightens. It's the same. Everything. It's like they're working from a template. I pull out my laptop and show him the timeline I have been building. His father's case fits the pattern exactly. First, manufactured debt through fake HOA assessments. Then, a forged management agreement gave the shell company control. Then, property tax payments from Heartland establish a paper trail that makes them look like the responsible party. Finally, a quitclaim deed was filed months later, transferring ownership to yet another shell entity. Not automatic, not quiet. Fraudulent recordings are buried in county offices where no one thinks to look. I ask Benjamin about the money. Where did the proceeds from his father's farm go? He pulls out bank statements he obtained during his failed lawsuit. The developer paid $420,000 for the land. That money went to Heartland Asset Management. From there, it was wired to an account in South Dakota, then to another account in Nebraska. He slides the statements across the table. The wire transfer records show the path clearly. Heartland Asset Management to Prairie Holdings, LLC to a final destination account. I look at the account name on the last transfer. Holloway Family Trust. Not an assumption, not speculation. Documented wire transfers ending in an account controlled by Brenda Holloway's family. I photograph Benjamin's documents. Every page, every bank statement, every piece of correspondence. Combined with what I already have, the structure is undeniable. 7 properties, 4 years, 3 shell companies funneling money to one trust. Brenda Holloway's HOA position isn't about community service. It's about access. Access to vulnerable homeowners, access to property records, access to information about who's isolated, who's declining, who has family too far away to notice until it's too late. Benjamin watches me work. "What happens now?" he asks. I tell him I'm building a case. Federal case, wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, the kind of charges that carry mandatory minimums. He's quiet for a moment. Then he says, "My father died thinking he'd failed, thinking he had lost the farm because he got old and made mistakes. He didn't know what they did to him." His voice cracks slightly. "If you can prove this, that matters more to me than any money." I drive back toward Madison County with Benjamin's documents secured in my bag. The pieces are connecting faster now. Brenda Holloway, Victor Shaw, Derek Nash, Linda Price, Heartland Asset Management, Heartland Security, the Holloway Family Trust. Each name is a node in a network designed to look like separate entities but functioning as a single operation. My grandfather wasn't unlucky. He was selected, targeted, processed through the same system that took Earl Thompson's land. Helen calls as I'm crossing the county line. "I found something else," she says. Heartland Asset Management filed paperwork last month with the Madison County Recorder, a corrective deed application claiming ownership of your grandfather's farm based on the management agreement and accumulated tax payments. The filing is incomplete, still pending approval, but if it goes through, they'll have recorded a legal claim to the property, a corrective deed, the kind of filing used to fix clerical errors in property records. Except there's no error here, just a shell company trying to convert 18 months of fraudulent management into permanent ownership. I ask when the filing was submitted. Helen checks. 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks before you arrived in Nebraska, they knew I was coming. Someone told them the grandson was finally showing up to claim the inheritance, and they accelerated their timeline to finish the transfer before I could stop it. The pending deadline for the filing approval is 12 days away. If I don't act before then, my grandfather's farm becomes legally contested property, years of litigation, tens of thousands in legal fees, and Brenda Holloway walks away with another stolen asset, 12 days. That's what I have to dismantle a 4-year operation and stop a filing that's already in motion. The clock just started.
I know what you're thinking. Why not arrest them now? Here's the difference. Arrest Brenda today. She claims the paperwork is a misunderstanding, civil dispute. Her lawyer delays for months while the corrective deed filing goes through anyway. Arrest her after I've documented every wire transfer, every forged signature, every shell company connection to that family trust. She faces federal conspiracy charges, mandatory minimums, no plea deals that matter, 12 days to build an airtight case, 12 days before that filing gets approved. The trap is almost ready. Stay with me.
Friday, day 8. 4 days until the corrective deed filing deadline. I sit in my motel room and make a decision. It's time to set the trap. I pick up my phone and call the number on Brenda Holloway's business card. She answers on the second ring, voice bright and professional, like she's been waiting for this call. "Mr. Bailey, I was hoping to hear from you." I tell her I've had time to think. I tell her the legal fees are piling up. I tell her I just want this to be over. There's a pause on the line. I can almost hear her calculating. "I understand completely," she says. "These situations are always difficult. Why don't we meet and discuss a resolution? I'm sure we can find something that works for everyone." I agree. She suggests her office at the HOA Community Center, Monday morning at 10. 3 days from now, I tell her I'll be there. After I hang up, I call the FBI field office in Omaha. I identify myself, provide my badge number, and ask to speak with the special agent in charge. 20 minutes later, I'm on the phone with SAC Patricia Reeves. I give her the summary. Elder fraud scheme targeting rural property owners, forged documents, shell companies, wire transfers crossing state lines, at least 7 victims across Nebraska and South Dakota, a pending filing that will complete the theft of my grandfather's farm in 4 days. She listens without interrupting. When I finish, she asks what I need. 2 things. I tell her, authorization to wear a wire during the Monday meeting, and 2 agents are on standby in case the conversation produces enough for immediate arrest. She's quiet for a moment. Then she says, "You understand the conflict of interest issues here?" I tell her I do. I tell her I've documented everything with a proper chain of custody. I tell her if she wants to hand this off to another agent, I'll step back, but we have 4 days, and I'm the only one who knows this case. She considers, "Get me everything you have by the end of the day tomorrow. If it checks out, you'll have your wire." Saturday. I spent 12 hours organizing the evidence. 143 documents, 67 photographs, 22 pages of timeline and connection analysis, wire transfer records, corporate registration filings, Benjamin White's bank statements, Martha Jennings's correspondence. Every piece is cross-referenced and indexed. I uploaded it to the Secure Bureau server at 11:45 that night. Sunday morning, SAC Reeves calls back. "You've got your wire. Agents Morrison and Tan will be in position on Monday. Don't push her, let her incriminate herself." Sunday afternoon, a courier delivers a package to my motel. The return address is Victor Shaw's office. Inside is a document labeled Settlement Agreement and Property Transfer. I read it 3 times. The agreement offers to forgive all outstanding HOA obligations in exchange for my signature on a quitclaim deed transferring ownership of the farm to Heartland Asset Management LLC. Additionally, I would receive a one-time payment of $10,000 as consideration for the voluntary transfer. $10,000. For a property worth over $300,000, the document is 22 pages long, filled with legal language designed to obscure what it actually does. But buried on page 19, there's a clause that makes my pulse quicken. Transferor acknowledges and agrees that this transfer is made voluntarily and without coercion, and that transferor has been advised to seek independent legal counsel. Here's why this document matters. In fraud cases, intent is the hardest element to prove. Defense attorneys argue their clients made mistakes, misunderstood the paperwork, acted in good faith, but this document isn't a mistake. It's a carefully constructed instrument designed to extract ownership of a $300,000 property in exchange for $10,000. The Seek Independent Legal Counsel clause proves Brenda knows what she's doing. She's not confused. She's not overzealous. She's deliberately structuring the transaction to create the appearance of voluntary consent while applying maximum pressure. This document is a confession in writing, and she just handed it to me. If you've been paying attention, you might remember something from earlier. Linda Price, the notary whose stamp appears on my grandfather's forged management agreement and on Earl Thompson's documents. Helen ran a deep check on her Friday night. Linda Price's notary commission expired 4 years ago. She never renewed it. Every document she's notarized since then is legally invalid. That means the management agreement Brenda used to justify controlling my grandfather's farm has no legal standing. The quitclaim deed filed on Earl Thompson's property can be challenged and potentially reversed. Every piece of paper in this scheme that bears Linda Price's stamp is vulnerable. Brenda doesn't know I know this. She thinks she's offering me a way out. She's actually handing me the final piece of evidence I need. Sunday night. I drive to my grandfather's farm one last time before the meeting. I park on the county road and walk to the gate in the darkness. The chain is still there, the padlock, the signs warn against trespassing on managed property. Behind the gate, the farmhouse sits dark and silent. No lights, no movement, just the wind through the bare trees and the distant sound of cattle from a neighboring property. I think about my grandfather standing in this same spot, looking at the same house, knowing something was wrong, but not knowing how to fight it. He wrote me that letter because he believed I could do what he couldn't. He trusted me to protect what 3 generations of our family had built on this land. I check my phone. The wire equipment arrives at 7 tomorrow morning. The meeting is at 10. Agents Morrison and Tan will be positioned in the parking lot, monitoring the transmission in real time. If Brenda says anything that constitutes confession or evidence of ongoing criminal activity, they'll move in immediately, if she's careful, if she sticks to vague language and plausible deniability. I'll have to let her walk out and build the case through other means. But I don't think she'll be careful. She's been doing this for 4 years without consequences. She thinks she's untouchable. She thinks I'm just another desperate heir ready to sign away my inheritance for pocket change. Tomorrow, she finds out how wrong she is. I take one last look at the farmhouse. the windows that my grandmother used to hang Christmas lights in, the porch where my grandfather taught me to whittle, the barn roof that sags now but once held the weight of 100 hay bales. This is my family's land, and tomorrow I take it back. Monday morning, 10 o'clock. The HOA Community Center is a beige building at the edge of Meadowbrook Estates, surrounded by a parking lot half filled with pickup trucks and SUVs. I arrive 5 minutes early. The wire is taped to my chest. A transmitter the size of a quarter feeding audio to Agents Morrison and Tan in an unmarked sedan 2 rows back. I checked the signal 3 times this morning, crystal clear. Everything Brenda says in the next hour will be recorded, documented, and admissible in federal court. I take a breath, step out of my car, and walk toward the entrance. The lobby smells like old coffee and carpet cleaner. A receptionist points me toward a conference room at the end of the hall. I open the door. Brenda Holloway sits at the head of a long table, perfectly composed, blonde highlights, designer blazer, a folder in front of her containing, I assume, the settlement documents. To her left sits Victor Shaw, the man pretending to be an attorney. To her right stands Derek Nash, arms crossed, watching me with the flat eyes of someone who's used to intimidating people into silence. 3 of them. One of me, at least, that's what they think. Brenda gestures to a chair across from her. Mr. Bailey, thank you for coming. I know this has been a difficult time. Her voice is warm, sympathetic, practiced. I sit down and say nothing. Let her talk. Let her fill the silence. I've reviewed your situation thoroughly, she continues, and I believe we can resolve this in a way that benefits everyone. The settlement agreement Mr. Shaw prepared is very straightforward. You sign the transfer documents, we forgive all outstanding obligations, and you walk away with $10,000, clean, simple, no lawyers, no courts, no prolonged stress. She slides the folder across the table, the same documents I received yesterday. I pick up the folder and flip through the pages slowly. This says I'm transferring a $300,000 property for $10,000. Brenda doesn't blink. The property has significant encumbrances, back taxes, maintenance liens, legal fees. When you factor in all the costs, $10,000 is a generous offer. I look at her. There are no back taxes. Heartland Asset Management has been paying them for 18 months. There's no maintenance lien on file with Madison County. And there are no legal fees because there's no active litigation. For the first time, something flickers behind her eyes. Uncertainty. But she recovers quickly. Those are administrative details. The point is, I interrupt her, the point is you're asking me to sign over my family's land based on debts that don't exist, using a management agreement my grandfather never signed. Victor Shaw leans forward. Mr. Bailey, I assure you, all documentation is in order. Your grandfather entered into this agreement voluntarily. I turn to him. With a notary whose commission expired 4 years ago, every document Linda Price has stamped since then is legally invalid, including the management agreement, including the quitclaim deed you filed on Earl Thompson's property. Shaw's face goes pale. Derek Nash uncrosses his arms. Brenda's composure cracks. I don't know what you think you know, she says, voice tightening. But you're making very serious accusations without evidence. I reach into my jacket and pull out my credentials. FBI badge, gold shield, blue letters. Actually, I have quite a bit of evidence. I'm Special Agent Alexander Bailey, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. This conversation is being recorded. You're all under investigation for wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse. The room goes silent. Brenda stares at the badge as it might bite her. Victor Shaw pushes back from the table. Derek Nash takes a step toward the door, then freezes when it opens. Agents Morrison and Tan step inside, hands resting on their sidearms. Nobody leaves, Morrison says. Brenda Holloway, Victor Shaw, Derek Nash, you're under arrest. The next few minutes are a blur of Miranda warnings and handcuffs. Brenda protests loudly. Victor demands his lawyer, which is ironic for someone pretending to be one. Derek says nothing, just stares at the floor with the resignation of someone who's been through this before. I stand by the window and watch them being led out to separate vehicles. Word travels fast in a small community. By the time the last patrol car pulls away, a small crowd has gathered in the parking lot. Neighbors, farmers, People who have lived under Brenda's HOA rule for years. I recognize a few faces from the diner, from the gas station, from the sidelong glances I've received all week. Martha Jennings is there, standing at the edge of the group, watching with tears in her eyes. I walk over to her. She takes my hand without speaking. Then someone else approaches, a man I don't recognize. Is it true, he asks, she was stealing farms? I tell him it's true, that there will be a full investigation. Anyone who received suspicious notices or felt pressured to sign documents should contact the FBI field office in Omaha. He nods slowly. My mother got letters last year. We thought it was just HOA nonsense. It wasn't nonsense. It was the beginning of a process designed to take everything she had. Within an hour, the story is everywhere. Local news crews arrive, phones ring with tips from other counties. The Madison County Sheriff's Office issues a statement pledging full cooperation with federal authorities. The narrative Brenda spent years constructing, the story of a dedicated community leader protecting property values, collapses in a single morning. I stand in the parking lot as the sun climbs higher. The wire is still taped to my chest. The adrenaline is still pumping. But underneath it all, there's something quieter, something that feels like the beginning of justice.
I'm not going to lie. At that moment, watching the handcuffs close around Brenda Holloway's wrists, I exhaled for the first time in 8 days. 8 days of being blocked from my own property. 8 days of being called a liar. 8 days of watching people who stole from the elderly walk around like they owned the world. That exhale wasn't revenge. It was relief. It was dignity returning. If you've ever faced someone who abused their power and got away with it, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. But we're not done yet. There's still the matter of consequences.
6 months later, the federal courthouse in Omaha, I sit in the gallery and watch Brenda Holloway stand before Judge Catherine Webb for sentencing. She's wearing a gray suit instead of her usual designer blazer. No highlights in her hair anymore, no confident smile. Just a woman facing the consequences of 4 years of calculated theft. The charges were substantial: wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, money laundering. The U.S. Attorney's Office built a case so thorough that Brenda's defense team recommended a guilty plea within 2 months of the arrest. No trial, no appeals, just a negotiated admission of guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation. Judge Webb wasn't feeling generous. "Ms. Holloway," she says, "you exploited your position of trust to systematically steal from elderly homeowners. You targeted people who were isolated, confused, and vulnerable. You forged documents. You intimidated witnesses. You destroyed families' legacies for personal profit." She pauses. "The court sentences you to 9 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay restitution for $1,247,000 to the victims of your scheme. 9 years, federal prison, no parole in the federal system. Brenda Holloway will serve at least 85% of that sentence. She'll be 63 when she gets out. The Holloway family trust has been seized. Her assets were frozen. The life she built on stolen land is gone. Victor Shaw received 6 years for fraud, conspiracy, and criminal impersonation of an attorney. Derek Nash received 4 years for conspiracy and intimidation. Linda Price, the notary with the expired commission, pleaded guilty to forgery and received 2 years of probation plus community service. She cooperated fully with the investigation, providing testimony that helped seal the case against the others. The network that operated for 4 years across 2 states was dismantled in less than 6 months. The property restorations took longer. Legal processes always do. But one by one, the stolen farms were returned to their rightful owners or their heirs. Earl Thompson's property was recovered and transferred to Benjamin White, who plans to restore it in his father's memory. Martha Jennings received a formal apology from the Madison County HOA Board and a refund of every fraudulent assessment she was pressured to pay. 2 other families in South Dakota were located and notified that they had claims to recover properties taken through the same scheme. The corrective deed filing on my grandfather's farm was rejected by the county recorder's office 3 days after Brenda's arrest. The paperwork was incomplete. They said the supporting documentation was invalid. What they meant was the whole thing was a fraud, and now everyone knows it. I stand on the porch of my grandfather's farmhouse on a warm afternoon in late spring. The paint has been redone, the sagging corner of the porch has been repaired, the chain and padlock are gone from the gate, replaced by a simple wooden sign that reads Bailey Farm in letters I carved myself. It's not much, but it's mine. It's been mine for 3 generations, and now it will stay in the family. Here's what I want you to take away from this story. If you own property, especially inherited property, especially in an area with an HOA, know your rights. Understand what an HOA can and cannot legally do. They can levy assessments. They can fine you for violations. In extreme cases, they can place liens, but they cannot seize your property without due process. They cannot forge your signature. They cannot hire private security to block you from your own land. If someone tells you otherwise, they're either ignorant or lying. Either way, don't believe them. Document everything. Every letter, every email, every interaction. Keep copies in multiple locations. If something feels wrong, trust that instinct. Contact an attorney, contact your state's real estate commission, contact law enforcement if necessary. The people who run schemes like Brenda's count on victims being too overwhelmed, too exhausted, or too isolated to fight back. Don't give them that advantage. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA has been restructured under new leadership, mandatory audits, term limits, transparent financial reporting. The people who remained in the community are rebuilding trust one meeting at a time. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. Communities are more resilient than the predators who exploit them. I walk to the edge of the property, where the dirt road meets the county line, the same road I drove down 8 days after Christmas, exhausted and grieving, only to find strangers blocking my way. I think about my grandfather, the letters he wrote, the warning he tried to give me, the faith he had that I would know what to do. I couldn't save him. I arrived too late for that, but I saved what he built. I saved what he wanted me to protect. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of freshly turned earth from the neighboring fields. Planting season, new growth. The cycle continues the way it has for 100 years on this land. This is Bailey Farm. It was my grandfather's. Now it's mine, and no one will ever take it again.